Hello and welcome to this Affinity photo tutorial, which is a beginner's guide, and it's part 10. And I want to look in this tutorial at two different adjustments, the HSL adjustment and the black and white adjustment. And these can be added to your image from either the layers menu, and you come down to new adjustment layer, and there you have HSL and black and white. You can also use keyboard shortcuts if they're available. On the PC, Control plus U, and on the Mac it'll be Command plus U. And you can also get to the list from this half black and white circle in the Layers tab, and there you've got HSL and black and white. Now, before I go into my explanation of this, I want to sort of point you towards three different tutorials made by other people, and I will link each one of these in the description to my video here, because mine's only going to be a sort of a basic look, and these are more advanced and probably better explained. Now this one, although it says Affinity Photo down here, this is really the Serif's own Affinity Photo YouTube page, and they're all done by James Ritson. And this is for the black and white adjustment. And when we have Olivio's 5 ways to make your photo stand out, and each different way that he explains, he pretty much uses the HSL adjustment on all of the 5 different ways. And the last one is by InAffinity, and it's HSL editing tips and techniques, where he edits this picture to get to this position using 5 different, I think it's 5, it might be 6 different HSL adjustments. And that will probably help explain better how to use the HSL adjustment. So like I said, these 3 videos, and there are plenty of other videos out there, will probably explain a more advanced version than I'm going to do. So coming back to Affinity Photo, and this is an image I took of where I live, and although it's not an actual HDR image, it is sort of HDR-esque, so the colours may not be 100% as they should be, but I quite like this style, and this is how I've done this. But I do know that although the grass looks green, it is really sort of mainly made up of yellows and sort of a bit of red and what have you. But we will find out a bit more about that in a minute. So let me open up the HSL adjustment, which I want to do first. And when you add an adjustment, it will add it as a layer above the layer that was highlighted. As I only had the one layer, it was added above. Now when Affinity Photo first came out, the HSL adjustment looked a lot different. It was more sort of sliders and what have you, and it did take me a long time to get used to this circular look, but I must admit I am sort of growing to like it. So we have 2 circles here, so the inner circle and the outer circle, and as you can see the colours match. So like, yeah, magenta is opposite magenta, green is opposite green, orange is opposite orange. Now it took me a little while to grasp this, but this is how I see it. It may not be 100% true, but this is how I explain this to myself. The inner circle is the sort of colours and settings of the image layer below, in this case background, because that stays constant. The outer circle is this adjustment, and these colours move, whereas the colours underneath stay the same. So if I move the sliders, it will affect only the outside ring, not the inner ring. So we have three sliders here: the hue shift, saturation shift, and luminosity shift. Sometimes some people call it lightness, but it's actually listed as luminosity. And underneath these rings we have 7 dots, different colours. The first one is the multicolored one, and this is the default setting because it encompasses all the colours. And then the other dots are the different colour ranges, so the reds will be for this area, the reds, and then yellows that area, greens, etc. So these different dots colours the different areas of this colour circle here. Now a quick look at the saturation shift. If I move this all the way to the left to -100, as you can see, the outer ring has gone completely grey, but the inner ring has still stayed as it was, and this has made a very quick black and white image. Now it is a very basic black and white image, and you'd have to add extra adjustments if you wanted to sort of tweak that setting. And if you move that all the way to the right, the colours, again, the colour on the outside ring hasn't changed, but they've become so oversaturated that it's sort of very horrible to look at. So let me reset that. The bottom slider, luminosity, sort of determines how bright light the sort of pixels will be. So moving this to the right will make this very bright, and you can see the outer circle has gone all white. And if I move it the other way, those pixels will become darker and darker until they're all black, like that outer circle there. So let me reset that. Now the hue shift is when you shift from the center position, which is where both these circles match exactly, and let's say I move this towards the green. As you can see, where the yellow is on the underlying image is now green, and like I said, this grass, or that looked green, was mainly made up of yellow and sort of oranges. And if I move this over to, say, the red end, opposite where the yellows are, there is now blue. You can see the grass is blue, and where the sky was blue, this area here, that is now the orange and red spectrum. So that is how the hue shift works. So let me reset that so these circles line up. Now if you click on one of these dots, say for example the red, you get this sort of line with 4 nodes on, and this red channel will affect everything in between those 4 dots. And you can move these, you can sort of narrow the field that is going to be affected, and the main area affected will be within the 2 inner dots, and the 2 outer dots is where it starts to fade to become not affected. So if I move this hue shift, let me bring this back outwards a bit so it might be easier to see. If I move this hue shift, it should only affect all the colours within this range here and have no effect whatsoever on the other area outside of that. So if I move this down to no colour, I mean, you probably can't see it so much in there because there may not be that many pixels in that area, but as you can see, that area there has gone to being the grey colour, and it slowly changes colour as it gets nearer to the outside nodes to becoming not affected whatsoever between these 2 side nodes. Let me just reset that. You can also then, I mean obviously you've got the yellow, the green, and they've all got their sort of different colour ranges, but you can change the area that you want to affect by, let's say the green for example, because like I said, you would think the grass was green, and if I then altered the saturation or what have you, even if I put this down to black and white, it's having sort of next to no effect to the grass here, although this is the green colour range and it's mainly being affected in this area here. So let me reset that, and what you need to do is select one of these dots, it doesn't matter which one, but select one of them, and then the picker option will become available. So you can click on the picker button, and then when you move the cursor out over the picture you get the sort of crosshair cursor, and I'm going to click somewhere down here in the grass, and say like this, what looks like a darker green here, and when I click on this, the area that it is selecting, it will move these 4 dots to where the colour it actually is. So I click on it now, as you can see it is mainly the yellows and sort of red to greens that colour is being selected from. And even if I pick one of these darker greens at the back for example, it doesn't move that far, and even the, I'm going for the lighter areas here, and now moving into the oranges and reds. So I'll go back to this green here. So now if I reduce this down, it is now having an effect on the grass where it didn't have an effect when I was selecting from the greens. So this is how you can alter a certain area, and as you can see that dot which started out, it was the green channel I think, is now changed to a sort of a yellow channel. So again you could use the hue shift and just alter the grass to whatever colour you want it to. So that is pretty much how you can use these, and you can extend these to quite a way to have an effect on more colours in the image, or you can reduce it down to have an effect on a much more limited area of colours. If I drop that down, as you can see there is still some yellows and sort of oranges and other colours that are now still in the picture, because there is a much less range of colours being affected by me dropping the saturation. So let me just reset that so everything's back to where it was. So similarly with the sky, I mean I personally would have guessed it would be in the cyan range, which is over here, but if I use the colour picker and pick from about there, it is actually from the darker blue colour range, and I can reduce that and take the sky or black and white, or boost the colours in that range, or you can sort of change the colours altogether. So it is sometimes advisable to sort of use the picker and pick the colour rather than sort of guessing that that is in the blue range or the cyan range or what have you. Using the picker you will get the sort of right range of colour that you want to change. Now obviously you do also have the opacity down here, so you can reduce the effect that that is going to have. So you could just sort of add a hint of pink or whatever colour, because that blue range is now sort of changed to a pink colour, or magenta I should say, or you can go at the 100%. And you can also change the blend modes, and some of them will give you some pretty good effects and some will give you some pretty horrible effects. It's more a case of what you are trying to do. If you wanted something a bit funky, it might be a good idea to try different blend modes. So that is pretty much the very quick look at the HSL adjustment. There is also a place up here where you can add a tick to change to HSV. Now, I had a quick look in the help files and it says that the HSV option makes the sort of sliders have a different effect. I've tried it and I personally couldn't see any difference. I'm guessing there is some difference, but I couldn't see a difference. But I would leave that unticked unless you sort of know what you're doing and what HSV, I think it stands for hue, saturation and values. But like I said, if you don't really know what's going to happen with that, I would leave that alone. So let me just delete that and we'll look at the black and white adjustment. Now obviously it makes an image go black and white, hence the name, and when you start it, all the nodes will be, or sliders will be in the same position, and the image that you get will be pretty much the sort of black and white image what you would get using the HSL slider and just dropping the saturation down to 0. A sort of rather bland and flat looking black and white image, which is okay if that's what you want to go for. Now the beauty of this is, because it is an adjustment and it sits above the color image, although this has made the image go black and white, that color image is still underneath and available to this adjustment. So you can move the red slider and it will affect just the reds, and so on and so forth. So say for example like the green, if I move this backwards and forwards, it is having no effect, because as we saw before, the grass isn't actually green in my image, it's more a yellowy orange. So if I move the yellow slider, it is now having an effect on those yellow pixels. So I could make the grass just a little bit darker, and obviously I know there is a bit of sort of orangey red in there as well, so this will also have an effect on the grass area here. And we'll just make that about there. And the same goes for the sky, because of what I did with the HSL, I know the sky is not really in the cyan, although it may have some effect. Yes, it does have some effect, but I would imagine we'll have more effect with the darker blue channel, because that is where most of those pixels were to be found. So if I drop that down quite a bit, we've now got those clouds better highlighted. I could then sort of just have a little tweak with the cyan, and yes, that's much better I think. So I'm guessing there's not going to be much magenta in this. Might be a bit in the grass. No, I personally can't see any effect the magenta is having. So it's a good idea to sort of have a tweak with all the different sliders to see how it affects your image. And if I just turn this on and off, that would be the color version, and that would be the black and white adjustment that I've just made. And hopefully you think that that is a better image than just having all the nodes all lined up with a rather flat black and white image. You know, the clouds look much better and it looks a much more interesting picture in black and white like that. Again, like before, you can change the opacity and just have a milder effect, and you can change the blend modes and get different effects this way. So it's worth experimenting with opacities and blend modes. And you do also have the picker here, so you could, so if I click on this and click on the grass, for example, hang on, it didn't select it. Why didn't it select it? Oh, I see. If I click and hold down and move it left and right, it will get darker and lighter in that area. Let me try it on the grass. Yeah, so I click and move it left and right, I can have an effect. So you learn something new every day. Even I didn't know that it did that, because I always just use the adjustments and do things by eye rather than using the picker option. So basically, if you click the picker option, put it to the area that you want to have a sort of change, click and hold down the mouse button and then move left and right to move the slider that is mainly that area's colour. But I personally think it would be a lot easier just to stick with changing the sliders yourself. So I think that is all I need to cover on those two adjustments. So hopefully this has helped some people, and like I said, check out those other videos which I mentioned earlier, and we'll link in the description to this one, because they are more advanced and better show the capabilities of these two adjustments. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.